The music stopped mid-note. Glasses froze mid-air. Even the laughter turned hollow as Evelyn Carter's hand slipped off the cake knife and she stumbled backward. The room fell deathly silent as the 80-year-old woman, dressed in her Sunday-best navy dress with lace gloves and pearls, gripped her chest and let out a breathless gasp. 3 grandchildren rushed forward, eyes wide with fear. But what none of the guests knew, not even her closest friend from church, was that this wasn't just about age or fatigue. Evelyn had just read the note hidden beneath the cake's silver tray, 8 words written in a hurried scrawl, in a hand she hadn't seen in 41 years. He's alive. And he's coming for you. Before we dive into this emotional and deeply personal journey, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. Tap that like button if you believe in the strength of family, and subscribe to follow the incredible life of one forgotten grandmother and the grandchildren she raised with nothing but prayer and grit. Would you recognize love if it came disguised in hardship? Let's find out. The house on Sycamore Lane was quiet again. Not the peaceful kind of quiet, but the hollow silence that creeps in when everyone else has left and all that remains is the ticking of a chipped kitchen clock. Evelyn Carter stood at the window, her hands trembling slightly as she dried a plate, eyes on the cracked sidewalk where her grandchildren used to race bikes. The twins had left for college that morning, on full scholarships. Jalen was already in law school. Michaela was applying for medical fellowships. They were all gone. And Evelyn had never felt more proud or more alone. Her story wasn't one anyone ever asked her to tell. Maybe it's because in neighborhoods like East Glenwood, Black grandmothers raising kids alone were too common to be exceptional. But Evelyn's journey didn't start with her grandchildren. It started with the loss of her only child, her daughter Vanessa, and the sudden arrival of 3 traumatized souls into her living room on a stormy night in 2004. Evelyn had just turned 59 when the call came. A crackling voice over the phone. "There's been an accident. Your daughter, she didn't make it." Vanessa Carter, single mother, struggling waitress, 2 jobs, no insurance, was hit by a drunk driver on her way home from her night shift. She died instantly. The man who hit her walked away with a bruised rib and 2 priors. Evelyn didn't scream. She didn't cry. She simply sat down in her chair, wrapped her cardigan tight, and stared at the wall for hours. By morning, 3 children were dropped at her door like luggage left at a lost and found. Jalen was 9. Michaela was 6. And the twins, Aaron and Andre, were barely 18 months. They didn't know how to grieve. Evelyn didn't know how to comfort, but she knew how to survive. She'd done it before, when her husband died in a steel mill collapse. When she lost her second pregnancy in 1984. When she worked 3 shifts cleaning hospital floors just to keep the heat on. Now she had to do it again, but this time for 4 children who didn't call her grandma, yet only, "Where's mommy?" Evelyn's home was barely 900 square feet, and there was barely enough space for their sorrow, let alone their stuff. But she made room. She gave up her bed for the kids and slept on a recliner. She cooked oatmeal when there wasn't enough for cereal. She walked 2 miles to the pharmacy when Andre got asthma. Jalen cried himself to sleep for 2 months straight. Michaela didn't talk for a year. And the twins had night terrors that made Evelyn sit by their bed whispering old gospel lullabies until dawn. But somehow, they healed. It was in the little moments, when Michaela drew a crayon family portrait with Evelyn in the center. When Jalen defended a girl at school from a bully and said, "That's what Grandma would have done." When the twins started calling her Mama E. Evelyn never remarried. Never took a vacation. Never told anyone that she sometimes worried she'd die before they were grown. But she never let them see her fear. Only strength. Jalen made honor roll, then valedictorian. Michaela became a science fair legend and earned the nickname Doc Mickey. The twins were inseparable, mischievous, creative, loud. Evelyn would sometimes sit on the porch, watching them play and think, "I'm still here. They're still laughing. That's enough." Except, it never felt like enough. Because there were days when the bills sat unopened and nights when Evelyn's arthritis kept her from walking without crying. There were judgments from people at church who whispered about her raising 4 fatherless kids. There were arguments with social workers who offered to take some of the burden off her shoulders. She never let go of those kids. Not once. Not even when she had to pawn her wedding ring to buy their winter coats. 2 years after the last one left for college, they planned a surprise party for her 80th birthday. Evelyn didn't know. She thought they were all too busy to visit. She told her neighbors she'd just bake a little carrot cake and call it a night. But behind the scenes, her grandkids were working tirelessly. They booked the old church hall, invited every person who had ever crossed her path, and found a way to fly in relatives Evelyn hadn't seen in decades. They even reached out to people Evelyn had quietly helped over the years, families she gave food to, kids she tutored in the evenings, and a woman she once shielded from an abusive ex. They were determined to show her what she never asked for: recognition. Not pity, not charity, but a standing ovation for a lifetime of sacrifice. And yet, someone else was preparing something very different. The morning of her birthday, Evelyn found a small white envelope under her front door. No stamp, no name, just her own name written in a familiar hand, one she hadn't seen since 1982. Inside, folded neatly, was a single note. "He's alive. And he's coming for you." Her heart stopped. She hadn't spoken of Harold Carter in 41 years. Not since he walked out, vanished, left her pregnant and broken. Not since the police told her he'd likely changed his name and fled the state. Not since she told everyone he was dead. But she knew that handwriting. She knew it like she knew the shape of her own grief. And as she stared at the note, her fingers trembling, Evelyn realized this birthday wouldn't just be a celebration. It would be a reckoning. Evelyn Carter didn't sleep that night. She sat in her worn recliner, the one with a tear in the left arm and a faded floral print, gripping the letter in her lap. The room was dimly lit by the soft glow of the porch light filtering through the lace curtains. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just sat, silent, unmoving, staring at her trembling hands. She had read that note at least 20 times. Each time, the same words stared back like ghosts refusing to die. "He's alive. And he's coming for you." By morning, the letter was folded neatly and tucked into the pages of her Bible, between Psalm 23 and a church bulletin from 1986. She didn't tell anyone. Not the neighbor who brought her coffee every Thursday. Not Pastor Green. Not even Jalen, who called every Sunday without fail. Because if she said it out loud, it would make it real. The last time she saw Harold Carter was 1982. He was 28. Loud, handsome, full of fire and smooth promises. A mechanic with grease under his nails and a hustler's smile. Evelyn was pregnant with Vanessa when he vanished. No note. No warning. Just a job that ran late and a paycheck that never came home. He had debts, lots of them. Evelyn always assumed he ran from more than just fatherhood. Everyone believed he was dead. She told them that. She needed them to. It was easier to bury a ghost than to explain why she was raising a child alone with no child support and no answers. Now, 41 years later, the ghost had returned. The church hall was already buzzing with decorations by the time the sun rose on Evelyn's birthday. Jalen had flown in the night before, carrying a garment bag with a tailored suit and a speech he'd been rehearsing since spring. Michaela had handled the catering, Southern comfort food with a vegan twist, just how Evelyn liked it. The twins were in charge of entertainment, which everyone assumed meant there'd be one questionable rap performance and at least 2 attempts to roast each other. But none of them knew about the letter. As guests began to arrive, neighbors, old co-workers from the hospital, her former pastor, the retired principal from Jefferson High, Evelyn sat upstairs in her room, staring at the navy dress she had laid out the night before. Her hands hovered over the fabric, unsure. That dress had belonged to her mother. She wore it at Vanessa's funeral. And now she was supposed to wear it to her own celebration? The irony wasn't lost on her. Downstairs, the decorations were simple but elegant, gold and cream streamers, photo boards of Evelyn through the decades, A banner that read, 80 years loved. Michaela arranged roses on every table, knowing they reminded Evelyn of the garden she kept until her knees gave out. And then the guests turned their heads as the door opened. Jalen stepped inside, taller than anyone remembered, looking every bit the lawyer he had become. Behind him, the twins carried in a large gift wrapped in silver foil. Michaela trailed behind, phone in hand, documenting everything for a surprise video montage they were planning to play after dinner. Evelyn still hadn't come down. Upstairs, she stared into the mirror. Her reflection looked unfamiliar. Not because of the wrinkles or the graying hair. She'd made peace with aging. But because behind her eyes, there was something she hadn't felt in decades. Fear. Not the kind that came from raising 4 kids on food stamps. Not the kind that crept in when the electricity bill went unpaid or when she skipped meals so the twins could eat. No, this fear was different. It was personal. It was Harold. The memory of him was sharp. He used to call her Red, because her hair caught the sun in a way that looked almost auburn. He had a laugh that could melt her resolve in seconds and fists that cracked drywall. The good and the bad lived side by side in her memory, entangled like roots beneath a house you thought was solid until it started to sink. She could still hear the sound of his boots stomping through the hallway when he was angry. Still remember the slam of the door the day he left and never came back. But if he was alive, why now? Why come back? And more importantly, who knew about him? She folded the dress carefully and changed into it with steady hands. She would not let a ghost steal this day. Not after everything. Not after all those years of sacrifice, of bedtime prayers whispered through exhaustion, of birthdays spent with homemade cupcakes and borrowed candles. When she descended the stairs, the entire room turned toward her. Conversations halted. Every guest rose to their feet in unison. It wasn't planned. No one told them to do it. It just happened. Because sometimes, love recognizes quiet greatness without needing to be told. Evelyn stood at the base of the steps, her shoulders square, her chin lifted. She looked every inch the matriarch they all knew she was. The applause began softly, 1, then 2, then the entire room. A standing ovation. Jalen approached, tears already brimming in his eyes. He offered his arm. "You look like royalty, Grandma." "Just tired royalty," she said, half laughing. "Help me to my seat before my knees remind me I'm 80. She smiled through it all. The speeches, the hugs, the stories from people she hadn't seen in decades. Michaela's slideshow played to a room full of laughter and tissues. There were photos of her holding the twins in the bathtub, Jalen in his cap and gown, Michaela winning her science fair medal. A lifetime of love told in snapshots. And then it was time for the cake. A 4-tiered buttercream masterpiece with candles shaped like the number 80. The room dimmed. Everyone raised their phones. The "Happy Birthday" chorus filled the hall with warmth. Evelyn stepped forward, knife in hand. But just before she cut the cake, she paused. It was there. Another letter. Folded, identical, tucked beneath the silver tray. This time it read, "You can't hide from your past forever." Her hand slipped. The knife clattered. She stumbled back. Jalen caught her before she fell. The room erupted in concern. Michaela called for water. The twins rushed to her side. Someone shouted for a doctor. But Evelyn wasn't fainting. She was remembering. There had been one other time, a year before Vanessa was born, when Harold disappeared for a week and returned with bruises and silence. She never asked where he went. Never asked who he owed. But she remembered the fear in his eyes. Like something or someone was following him. And now someone was following her. She sat down, breathing slowly, trying to ground herself. "Grandma, are you okay?" Michaela asked, crouching beside her. Evelyn forced a smile. "Just dizzy. Maybe too much sugar." "I'm fine, baby." But she wasn't fine. Because when she glanced toward the back of the hall, past the crowd, past the photo boards, past the cake, she saw him. A man standing in the shadows near the exit. Older. Gray hair. Lean frame. But something about the posture, the eyes. Harold. Alive. Watching. He didn't come forward. He didn't speak. He just tipped his hat and vanished out the door before anyone else could turn around. Evelyn didn't say a word about what she saw. Not to Jalen, who kept checking her pulse even after she insisted she was fine. Not to Michaela, who was pacing in the corner trying to get a signal to call the family doctor. Not to the twins, who had gone to warm up their musical tribute and were blissfully unaware that their grandmother's past had just stepped out from the shadows and right back into her life. The man by the exit was gone by the time anyone else looked. No one else had seen him. But Evelyn had. And she didn't need confirmation. The way he stood. The way he tipped his hat like he used to on Sunday mornings after church, pretending he was a gentleman when he'd been anything but. The stoop in his shoulders, like life had worn him down, but not broken him. It was Harold. Harold Carter. Alive. And watching her birthday from the sidelines like some uninvited ghost with unfinished business. For the rest of the evening, Evelyn smiled politely. She hugged guests, posed for pictures, nodded through speeches. But her eyes kept drifting to the doorway. She kept expecting him to come back in. He didn't. And yet, somehow, that was worse. That night, after the last balloon had deflated and the church hall had emptied out, Evelyn sat in the back seat of Jalen's rental car, staring out the window in silence as he drove her home. Michaela rode up front. The twins had stayed behind to help clean up. Jalen glanced at her through the rearview mirror. "You sure you're okay, Grandma?" She nodded. "Just tired, baby. It was a big day." "You scared us, collapsing like that." "I didn't collapse. I stumbled." "Same thing," Michaela said. "We thought we were gonna have to call an ambulance. I've had worse. Giving birth to your mama in a blackout during a snowstorm was worse." Jalen chuckled, but his eyes didn't leave the mirror. "You know you don't have to pretend with us. If something's going on." Evelyn's voice softened. "I'm just old, not dying." But she knew she was lying. Not about her health, but about something being wrong. Something was very, very wrong. The third letter came the next morning. This time it wasn't left at the door. It was inside her house, folded neatly on her kitchen table. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Same paper. Same handwriting. "You should have told them." "Now I will." She gripped the back of the chair to steady herself. There was only one person who could have written that, and he was supposed to be dead, buried by memory and time. But Harold wasn't dead. And now, after 4 decades of silence, he wanted to be seen. Not by her, but by them. By the grandchildren who had only ever known her version of the story. Evelyn had never told them the truth about Harold. She'd never told anyone, not really. Not about the gambling. Not about the money he stole from her mother's funeral fund. Not about the night he broke the television with his bare hands during a rage and Vanessa, barely 5 years old, hid under the bed until morning. She hadn't told them how he used to disappear for weeks. How the cops once knocked on her door asking questions about a robbery Harold might have known about. She hadn't told them about the night he came home high, incoherent, violent. She'd told them he died in a car accident. That was the story she fed them, spoonful by spoonful, in bedtime tales of who their grandfather used to be. A good man. A mechanic. A dreamer. It was easier to create a hero than to explain why she had once loved a villain. And now Harold was threatening to unravel all of it. That afternoon, Evelyn sat in her living room, the letter open in her lap, when the doorbell rang. Jalen stood there holding a coffee cup. "Thought you might need some company." She didn't have the energy to lie. "Come in, baby." He sat across from her, eyes soft, posture careful. "You've been quiet since the party." "I'm old. Quiet is part of the package." "You're not just quiet. You're guarded." She looked at him, her grandson who had grown into a man so full of purpose and kindness it made her ache. He was everything Harold wasn't. "I need to ask you something," she said, her voice low. "When you were cleaning up the party, did you see anyone? A stranger?" Maybe outside. Jalen furrowed his brow. A few people walking by, but no one suspicious. Why? No reason, she said too quickly. Just thought I saw someone from a long time ago. You sure that's all it was? She nodded. But Jalen wasn't convinced. That evening, after he left, Evelyn locked her doors for the first time in years. Not just the front one. All of them. Even the windows. She pulled down the shades, shut off the porch light. Then she took the letters, all 3 of them, and burned them in the kitchen sink. She didn't want them in the house. She didn't want them anywhere near her family. But Harold had made one thing clear. If she didn't tell them, he would. So she sat at her kitchen table, pulled out a legal pad, and began to write. She wrote everything. The truth. The abuse. The money. The fear. The love she clung to because she didn't know anything better. The night he left. The years she spent pretending he never existed. She wrote for hours. She wrote until her hands cramped and her vision blurred, and the past spilled onto the page like it had been waiting to be released for decades. And then she folded the letter, placed it in an envelope, and wrote 4 names across the front. Jalen, Michaela, Aaron, Andra. She placed the envelope in the Bible, right where the first letter had been tucked. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the sound of gravel crunching in the driveway. She peeked through the curtain. A man stood at the edge of her lawn. Same gray hair. Same worn coat. Same stare. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was waiting. Evelyn opened the door. They stood facing each other, a lifetime between them. "Hello, Red," Harold said. Her voice didn't waver. "You're not welcome here." He looked thinner than she remembered. Hollowed out. As if regret had been chewing through him for years. "I just want to talk." "Talk," she said, her fists curling. "Now? After 41 years. I know I don't deserve it. But they do." Her breath caught. "You stay away from them. I need them to know who I was. Who I am. They don't need your version of anything. I'm dying." The words landed like stones. He held up a shaking hand. "Lung cancer. Stage 3. Don't worry, I ain't looking for pity. I'm looking for peace." She stared at him. The man who'd once stolen her youth now stood on her porch asking for her time. "Then you better make it quick." Evelyn didn't invite him in. She stood firm in the doorway, hands at her sides, her spine straight despite the ache in her back. The morning sun lit the edges of her silver hair as if it were a crown. She was not the girl Harold Carter had once left behind. She was a woman who had survived him. "I said you could talk," she said. "Didn't say you could come in." Harold nodded. "Fair enough." He stayed on the porch, clutching a faded cap in his hands, shifting his weight from one foot to the other like a man preparing for judgment. Evelyn said nothing, giving him no comfort. She waited. "I've been clean for 19 years, Harold said quietly, eyes scanning the porch like he was counting memories he'd never lived. Rehab down in Mississippi. Got sober. Worked at a plant for a while. Took up welding." Evelyn didn't blink. "You want applause?" "No," he said. "Just wanted you to know I wasn't running all that time. Not from you. From myself, maybe. From the mess I made." "You didn't run," she snapped. "You disappeared. You left me pregnant and broke. You left Vanessa without a father. She died thinking you were already gone." "I didn't know," he whispered. "I swear to God, I didn't know she passed." She narrowed her eyes. "You didn't care to find out." That shut him up. They stood in silence for a long moment. 40 years of silence, thick and heavy in the humid air. "I'm not here to cause trouble," Harold finally said. "I got maybe a few months left, if that. I didn't come to ask for forgiveness. I came because I don't want to die without looking those kids in the eye and telling them the truth." Evelyn flinched. "They're not yours," she said. "They're mine. Mine because you were too much of a coward to show up for your own child. I raised them. I buried Vanessa. I cleaned up the mess you made." "I know," Harold said. "That's why I want to thank you." She scoffed. "Don't you dare. Don't you put a ribbon on this like it's a gift. He lowered his head. They deserve to know who I was. Even if it's the worst of me. She stepped out onto the porch, eyes blazing. You had 40 years to do right. You waited until your lungs gave out and your conscience finally showed up. You don't get to rewrite the story now. I ain't trying to rewrite it, he said softly. I'm just trying to finish it honest. Evelyn stared at him for a long, agonizing moment. Then she turned and walked back into the house, shutting the door without another word. He didn't knock again. For the rest of the day, Evelyn sat in the quiet house, hearing his voice in the walls, his shadow clinging to the corners like smoke. By evening, she went to her bedroom and opened the Bible. The letter she'd written to her grandchildren was still there. But she knew that now, it wasn't enough. The next day, Evelyn called Michaela. I need all 4 of you here tomorrow. Don't ask questions. Just come. Michaela heard something in her tone that made her cancel her rounds at the clinic. Jalen rearranged court appointments. The twins called off a local performance. They arrived by noon the next day, confused but obedient. When they stepped into the living room, they found Evelyn standing by the fireplace with the letter in her hand. She didn't sit. She didn't cry. She simply read, word for word, every truth she had buried beneath bedtime stories and false memories. The real Harold. The abuse. The betrayals. The lies. The fear. The hurt. The silence that nearly drowned her. The kids didn't speak. Not at first. They listened, stunned, as their grandmother peeled back the story of their bloodline like old wallpaper, revealing the cracks in the foundation they never knew existed. Jalen was the first to speak. So he's alive? Evelyn nodded. Michaela's voice shook. Why didn't you tell us sooner? Because I didn't want his shadow to follow you, Evelyn said. I wanted to give you a clean start. I didn't want you to carry his weight. Andre looked at his twin. And now he wants to meet us? Evelyn hesitated. Yes, but only if you want to. I told him he's not welcome unless you say otherwise. Aaron stared at the floor. What do you want us to do? I want you to decide for yourselves, Evelyn said. I won't stop you. But I won't ask you to forgive him either. Jalen paced the room, anger flickering in his eyes. He doesn't get to waltz in at the end and ask for peace. He gave up that right. Michaela bit her lip. But if he's dying, what if he's telling the truth now? He probably is, Evelyn said. But truth don't make you clean. It just makes you honest. That night, after the grandkids left, they called each other. They talked for hours. Some of it was yelling. Some crying. Some silence. But by morning, they had made a decision. And it came in the form of a knock on Evelyn's door. She opened it to find all 4 standing there. We want to see him, Jalen said. But we want you there too. She blinked. Are you sure? We're not doing it for him, Michaela added. We're doing it for us. For closure. The next day, Evelyn called Harold. They agreed to meet in a public place, neutral, safe, quiet. A church annex on the edge of town. When Harold walked in, he looked like a man already halfway to the grave, thin, hunched, pale. He removed his cap. His hands trembled. Jalen stood with his arms crossed. Michaela sat with a notebook, always observing. The twins leaned against the wall, guarded but curious. And Evelyn? Evelyn sat between them all like the pillar she had always been. Harold looked at them one by one. You don't owe me anything, he said. You don't have to say a word. I just wanted to say mine. He told them everything. Not excuses. Just facts. The addictions. The arrests. The bad decisions. The fear. The regret. He told them about the night he almost came back but saw Vanessa through a shop window and was too ashamed to face her. He told them about the years in recovery. The therapy. The cancer. He told them he never stopped thinking about the daughter he failed and the grandchildren he didn't deserve. When he finished, silence hung in the room like a held breath. Jalen spoke first. You hurt my grandma. You hurt our mom. And now you want us to, what? Forgive you? No, Harold said. I just want you to know who I am. Even if you walk away and never look back. Aaron looked at his grandmother. What do you think, Mama E? She didn't answer right away. Then she stood, walked to Harold, and looked him dead in the eye. I survived you, she said. That's all they need to know. And then she turned to the kids. You can speak. Or you can leave. But whatever you do, do it for yourselves. Not for him. Andre stepped forward. I want to ask one thing. If you hadn't gotten sick, would you have still come? Harold swallowed hard. I honestly don't know. Andre nodded. That's what I thought. He walked out. Aaron followed. Jalen shook Harold's hand, firm and cold. For what it's worth, you gave us someone to rise above. Then he left too. Only Michaela stayed behind. She walked up to Harold, reached into her bag, and handed him something. It was a photograph. Vanessa, smiling with Evelyn and the kids, all crowded on a couch from 20 years ago. She made a beautiful life without you, Michaela said. And now you'll carry that to your grave. And then she left. Evelyn stood with Harold for a moment longer. I won't see you again, she said. I know. Make peace with God, Harold. Don't expect it from me. I won't, he said. But I'll carry the memory of this day like a scar. And maybe that's enough. The leaves had begun to fall on Sycamore Lane, brushing the sidewalk in amber waves as the seasons shifted. Inside the house, Evelyn Carter sat on her porch with a crocheted blanket across her lap, a warm mug of chamomile tea in her hands. Her Bible was open, though she wasn't reading it. The envelope with the kids' names had been removed days ago. She no longer needed it to hold the truth. They knew now. And somehow, she still feared what that truth might do to their hearts more than her own. But they hadn't broken. Each grandchild returned to their life with something deeper etched into them. Not bitterness. Not blame. Just understanding. A knowing that even love, at its best, comes from imperfect people carrying unbearable things. Jalen called the next morning after the meeting with Harold. His voice was steady. You did what you had to do, Grandma. No one else could have done what you did. Evelyn smiled. I didn't do it alone. Yes, you did, he said gently. We were just the reason. Michaela visited that weekend, bringing groceries she knew Evelyn didn't need but appreciated anyway. She sat with her in the kitchen, silently folding dish towels while Evelyn stirred stew. They didn't talk about Harold. They didn't need to. Some truths are like seeds. Once planted, they grow quietly, changing the ground beneath them without anyone noticing. And the twins, they coped the way they always did. Loudly, playfully. They turned it into a song, one that wasn't cruel but cathartic. A blues rap hybrid they performed at a local open mic night, called Grandfathered Out. People clapped. Some cried. Evelyn heard about it from a neighbor. She didn't ask to hear the lyrics. She just smiled and said, they're healing in their own way. 2 weeks after the meeting, Evelyn received a small package in the mail. No return address. Inside was an old photograph. Faded. Worn at the edges. It showed Harold, young, arms around Vanessa, smiling like he had the whole world ahead of him. And scribbled on the back in shaky handwriting were 6 words. I finally saw who I left behind. No note. No explanation. But Evelyn understood. She burned the photograph. Not out of anger, but as closure. As release. She whispered a prayer over the ashes and let the smoke rise. She never heard from Harold again. Word reached her 3 months later that he had passed quietly in a hospice center outside Baton Rouge. Alone. No funeral notice. No obituary. No family came forward. Evelyn didn't tell the grandchildren until after Christmas. They were quiet when she shared the news. No one cried. Jalen simply nodded. I hope he found peace. I hope you all do too, she said. That night, the family gathered around the dinner table for the first time since her birthday. It was simple: fried chicken, greens, cornbread, peach cobbler. Evelyn had cooked most of it herself, refusing help. She wanted to. It made her feel needed. As they laughed and passed plates, Evelyn looked around the table at the 4 lives she had raised from the ashes of another's absence. Jalen, the protector, thoughtful and strong. Michaela, the heart, sharp but soft where it mattered. Andre and Aaron, the energy, the spark, the stubborn hope. And she thought, I didn't get the life I dreamed of, but I got the family I was meant to have. After dinner, the twins brought out one last surprise. Grandma, Aaron said, pulling out a black velvet box. We wanted to give you something real this time. Not just jokes and rhymes. Speak for yourself, Andre muttered. Mine came with jokes. They laughed as Evelyn opened the box. Inside was a locket. Engraved. She turned it over and read the inscription. For the woman who gave us everything. Inside were 4 tiny portraits. Each of their faces, smiling, captured in candid joy. Her eyes watered before she even realized they had. She clutched the locket, breath catching. Michaela reached over, pressing her hand gently. You've given us more than love. You gave us our lives. And you gave mine back to me, Evelyn whispered. They sat there a while longer, no one rushing to leave. There were no more secrets. No more shadows. Only the quiet truth of a legacy born not of perfection, but of resilience. Weeks later, the story of Evelyn Carter would quietly spread in the neighborhood. A woman who had raised 4 grandchildren on her own, survived heartbreak and found peace, not through wealth or fame, but through endurance and love. But Evelyn never wanted recognition. She never wanted pity. Only a quiet porch, a warm mug, and the laughter of the children who used to call her, now calling her home. And on her next birthday, 81 this time, there were no letters. Only cake. Only candles. And a room full of people who knew exactly who she was.